Hello there. This week we're looking at effective ways to find new compositions because that's what we're all trying to do, isn't it? Let's go. Before we get into this though, if you haven't done so yet, please do check out my landscape photography masterclass. If you're looking for the kind of normal knobs and buttons type tutorial, this is definitely not for you. We do cover all the technical aspects, but we're also going to build on top of that by delving into the artistic side of landscape photography as well. That includes an hour and 20-minute session on composition. And the whole thing is designed to inspire, to entertain, and to educate, and I really think you're going to love it. Just head over to firstmanphotography.com/masterclass or hit the link down below. When I'm talking to photographers, one of the things that many people mention when they're talking about composition is how to find original compositions. And that's understandable because we all are, aren't we? But there are some easy, effective ways that we can do that will help us find those unique and original compositions. Number one is to visit the classic locations. And I know some people sometimes have a problem with this, but I think it's something you should definitely do. And they're classic locations for a reason. And that's because they're utterly, utterly beautiful. Take a place like Glencoe in Scotland, for example. It's so fantastically awe-inspiring that even if you're not into photography, you've just got a mild interest in the outdoors or nature, it's definitely a place you should visit. Now we have to be forgiving of ourselves and shoot for ourselves. And I think that includes shooting those classic compositions because the photography world, or the landscape photography world particularly, seems to have a different idea about how we should learn. Because when we're learning any artistic endeavour, one of the very first things we do is to do what someone else has done before. Because imitation is such an effective way to learn, and I've talked about this a fair bit recently. So getting into that location, you know already kind of what the composition's going to be. It gives you the opportunity to then practice with your camera, building your confidence in the camera, get your settings right, make the most of the compositions, and then still come away with a good image at the end of it. And I think most of us, and I'm no different, I want to have those classic compositions as part of my overall portfolio, often because they sell well as well. The great thing about these locations is because they are so beautiful, if you then just turn around 90 degrees or 180 degrees and point your camera in a different direction, in so many of these classic locations, there will be other compositions to get. And by combining that with some of the other things we're going to talk about, you can come away with some really unique images. So by turning the camera a bit, or moving it up and down, we are changing our perspective. Perspective in photography is the relationship between your camera or the sensor of the camera and the things in the scene in front of you. And just by shifting that perspective away from what we might normally do will provide a different kind of image. Get low to the floor as an example, because if there's something on the ground below you that's close to you, you can then use that as part of your foreground interest. Spread the legs of your tripod, put it on a beanbag or something like that to have that foreground right close to your lens. Similarly, you can tilt, you can turn up and down, you can get high with a drone and shoot from that high up perspective that virtually no one else is getting. Shoot vertically down if you've got a drone. There are so many options if you shift or change your perspective. Walk up a hill a little bit to get a view down on the scene that you have a bit. Put that tiny little bit of effort into getting a slightly different picture and you'll be amazed at what that small amount of effort produces. It's by shifting and changing our perspective that lets us arrange the things in our scene in a way that will produce an interesting composition. Especially when we think about we have to bring the 3D world down in to an interesting 2D image. Exploring and scouting are a huge part of becoming a great landscape photographer. We often will talk about having a plan before you go out, but that plan doesn't need to go much beyond spending the day out in nature, going for a walk for a few hours, going on an adventure up a mountain, anything that gets you out and about into the outdoors and creates opportunities for capturing good images. When I think about it, a really large number of my best images have come about in that way, when I've just gone out with very low expectations, and by being out and about, you just happen across something that's amazing, something that's brilliant, something that's gonna make a really original and unique picture. And the great thing is, the more often you do it, the more likely that is to occur. People will say it's luck. Sometimes it's just a bit of hard work and effort. Exploring and scouting can be anything from traveling across the world to something much more local. And I'm a big fan of the local stuff because by getting to know that landscape and immersing yourself in that landscape as often as possible, you're going to get to know it a lot more than other people. So you'll know those little places that could produce a good image. You will know when the weather is correct or what the sunlight is doing to make the very best images of that location, and it will result in you producing work that is unique to you and unique to that area as well, which will generate more interest. The nice thing about these tips is that the more of them that you combine together, the more likely you are to come away with a unique or original composition. But overriding that all is the weather. When we first start out doing landscape photography, I think most of us have in our mind of that beautiful big scene with a bright, colourful sunrise or sunset. I was no different when I started, and I still love those images today, and I do seek them out. But if I only ever went out when those conditions looked likely, then I would hardly get out at all. Going out in different weather or bad weather is one of the very best ways to come away with original compositions, because the weather and the conditions can just completely change the landscape in a way that's unique and different and interesting. Take these images here. They're all shot within about half of a mile of each other, but in very different conditions. So this one is that classic sunrise, that beautiful, colourful sky. But then this one here is shot in virtually the same place, but on an overcast day. And it's just a morning that a lot of people might not have gone out, but it still produced something very mystical and special. And I think it's just as beautiful as that first one. Another big vista here, but with a cloud inversion. It was forecast to be a very sunny day, but the cloud at the start of the day sunk into the valley and provided this opportunity. This is another one of that's on that same day. You can see the video of that if you want. It just would not have worked if that cloud and that inversion wasn't there. And by getting out on that day that was expected to be completely blue skies, it's allowed me to create something almost unique. Shooting in the rain can also produce some unique images, like this one here at Flamborough Head with that thunderstorm coming towards me. Or this one here in the Peak District, which has a bit more of a subtle feel. It's a bit more ethereal with a softer feel to it. We also shouldn't restrict ourselves to just shooting during golden hours, because if we get out and explore the landscape during all times of the day and shoot to the conditions, we can still produce something very special or come across something very special and create a unique image like I did the other week. One of my favourite ways to get original compositions, and I talked a bit about it at the top of the mountain last week, is to use a longer lens. I use the 70 to 200mm lens, which just lets you get in close on an aspect of the landscape. And on the masterclass, I talk about what to look for when you first get into a landscape. And by strapping on a longer lens, it lets you focus in or get close in on those things and produce a really interesting image from it. The biggest plus for me though with using a longer lens is the ability to storytell with it. When we go in tight with this lens, we're purposefully cutting off things that are within our field of vision and focusing the attention down onto that area. And that could be done just purely for the artistic purpose, but it could also be because the surrounding environment isn't particularly exciting. There might be a road or a pole, but that focus where you are is where your attention is where you are making a connection with that landscape. And you can tell the story of that landscape in the most interesting way possible. It then just leaves it to the viewer's imagination to fill in the blanks. Even in the most famous locations, with the longer lens like the 70 to 200 attached, you'll be able to create some unique and original compositions, and the possibilities really are endless. In part, I'm a big believer of getting things right in camera. Not necessarily with exposure or JPEG processing, but in terms of composition. So I will try as often as possible not to crop my image because I want to maximize the resolution that my camera is providing. I say try because sometimes it doesn't work, and especially when we're learning, using the crop tool is a very effective way of maximizing the potential of our composition. So it's definitely something that I would encourage you to do. Taking that a step further though, we can think about cropping in the field, because we can do it by changing our aspect ratio purposefully in a planned way. Because there are times when we might be at a scene where, similar to with the 70-200 lens, is that there's one portion of the scene that we want to photograph and we want to tell the story of, but things towards the edge of the frame might not be as interesting. That would be a perfect time to crop down to something like a square crop. And by having images in lots of different aspect ratios, like a square crop, a 3x2 that many cameras normally shoot, or an 8x10 or a panorama, by having all those things in our portfolio, it can really add another element of interest and intrigue in our overall photographic body of work. That then leads nicely on to the next point, that when we are out shooting the image, try to think about the final piece of work that you're going to produce, whether that's a print or a fully post-processed bit of work. What that does is, by having that forward-thinking visual idea of what you want to create, it means that we can make compositions out of things that we see that many casual camera users would just walk past. Pay attention to tone and to colour and natural contrast that occurs that we can then enhance in post-production, like I've done here with this tree. Take this waterfall image as well. At the time of shooting this, I knew I was going to use the radial filter to darken the area around the waterfall, which is not where the interest is, and it distracts you from the waterfall. But by using that radial filter, I'm forcing attention onto the story that I'm trying to tell, which is the rainbow and that waterfall and beautiful colours it's created. It's also not fixing it in post if you plan it from the start. Now, there's lots more in the masterclass, and it will inspire you to think a bit differently and more confidently about your compositions. Just head over to firstmanphotography.com/masterclass or hit the link down below to find out more. Subscribe, like, do what you need to do, and I'll see you on another one very, very soon. I'm Adam, this is First Man Photography, out.
Daddy?
Yeah?
How can a spider be flying?
I don't know, darling, on its web. I'm just filming at the moment, okay?